All right, guys. I'm going to be doing Module 5. This is an operations-only module. What are we doing? We're going to touch briefly in this chapter about surface rescue. Remember, the program we're teaching is based upon the 1006, what we'll call it the 1670 requirements for operations, which say that everybody who operates at this level should be able to do everything that a 1006 operations level person should do. And a 1006 operations level person should be able to do everything a surface water person can do. So that's why we're talking about it, if somebody asks, right? We're going to identify the difference between surface and swift water, what can cause the events, how they differ, what is current speed, and how does it change. Again, we talked a little bit about that earlier, but we're going to talk about those forces a little bit more. Defensive swimming, why we're going to talk about it, why it's important, what roles we have on the ground, some basic rope, and then how to terminate that incident. So surface water is everything less than 1 knot. Swift water is everything above. Events can occur during flooding, recreational use, accidental immersion in moving water of any kind, right? Those flood response on the right is going to be very similar to our nature of response when we're in that swift water environment. So there's a lot of parallels there. Those surface skills are the basis, for all the other work. Don't underestimate the threat. Again, flooding causes more deaths than any other severe weather, and greater than 50% are walking into the water. Pre-planning is important, and don't look at the size of your body of water as being why it's an issue. You got to have the JPRs of surface if you were going through and testing on this. And remember, swift water is dynamic. It can be extremely dangerous, and moving water behaves in predictable managing waves. Many people underestimate the amount of strength the water will present, and the water will never stop. We can't beat the water. So what is current speed, right? So we can have a little bit of water really moving, and that's going to affect our ability to, keep our feet firmly planted, or a lot of water that's not really moving, right? So we got to be able to pick up on how fast that water is moving. Quick way to estimate the speed: something floating 100 feet in 1 minute equals 1 knot. All right, so if it's really cooking, you got to look at a greater distance to measure that. The larger the object, the more force it will be applied to it. So hanging a body of water in the water from an aerial is incredibly dangerous, because we're now adding more restriction that's pulling on that versus me just hanging, a throw bag down to the person and then trying to get hands on that. Current velocity also plays into forces of the current. If the speed of current doubles, the force applied is quadrupled. So we're going to this event, right? We got to have an understanding. We started talking about how we set up command, but what is important, that search and that assessment. When does the size up start? Pre-planning it, based upon your previous events, and then starting at dispatch. So what does that look like at dispatch? So if we're going to a surface water event versus a swift water event, is it a foot entrapment? We may not see them. They may have gone off a kayak. We may not see them. So we got to know what kind of features may trap them and begin that as part of our assessment. Looking at how fast the water is traveling, and then really quick using our awareness level personnel to go and do a hasty search at, below the point they could have been furthest and working upstream is all going to play a part. Once we find them, let's look at their condition, the environment. Is the water going down? Is it coming up? All this is going to help us build that plan. Once we've got all that, then we can, start on our work of rescuing. In order for us to operate on scene, we talked about some of the constraints. We have to have abilities to communicate. What do our radios look like? That $7,000 trunking radio may not be waterproof, so do you have additional models? Guys, in this part of the program, I like to have my Motorola's out, talk about the difference between FRS and GMRS and the different bands, and saying, okay, channel 20 is actually going to go 5 miles, not 1 through 16. So look at the radio, figure out what those bands are, but just understand, one, FRS those lower numbers on the talkabouts, those are a half watt of transmit, where you can have greater transmit in the other radios. The other radios can additionally have repeaters for your car. So this is all a model for responding to these incidents that could help us support. But we need to have a communication adjunct. So what does that look like? Hand signals, whistle blasts, chemical lights in our hands, right? So let's talk about whistle blasts and hand signals. Help emergency, 3 whistle blasts, and waving one arm or both arm above your head. Wave a paddle above your head. Demonstrate this. Okay, attention. 1 whistle blast, trying to get your attention. I'm going to tap the top of your head with one hand or both hands. If I look at you, I blow my whistle, you got to respond back. Hey, I'm blowing my whistle, but I'm giving you a hand signal. I'm okay. We want to encourage everybody that if they hear that whistle blast, they should look up. Direction. All right. Point. Hey, you, use your paddle if you need to. Point your hand. So, I can look at River Right and say, you guys, are you okay? So these are on point. Stop. One or both hands above your head. Football pose. Use your paddle horizontally in your hand. Lengthen your line. So this, and reinforce them, big hands. We can't see this. Can't see coordinal, so big hands, nice and wide. And if it's dark out, put glow sticks, chemical lights in their hands. Tension line, release line. So this looks like you're slashing, you're cutting. The important thing to remember is any communication model we agree upon beforehand allows us to use it. So if I say, hey guys, for this operation, if I say release, I want you to first run it through your hands. Don't let go, but just let it free run. Whereas if I blow 3 whistles and I yell and I'm screaming cut, that might mean that you're going to cut the line. Wrap it up. Victim recovered, arms crossed across our chest. Remember, whistle blast and the hand signals is going to be helpful. Picking the right kind of whistle is important in a working water. And sometimes some of these things help if we print it for those guys. That's just a model they can adopt if they want. When you're doing your size up, is this a small incident, medium, large? What's command look like? Are we adding additional resources? Do we have active search measures, passive search measures, downstream areas? We're not, but just keep that going throughout the incident because things might change. Site surveys, again, pre-planning. Recognizing those hazards. Again, the environmental is big for us too, so we can talk about this. We've talked about ICS. We've talked about water terminology. We've talked about medical. Now let's start putting it together. What is the hazards of the water site we're going to? Is it moving? Do we have the equipment, personnel, and training to effect a rescue? If it's 80 feet wide, there is no onshore rescue, correct? Now we're bringing it to a boat. We're going to potentially go rescue. So these are all things we need to be mindful of. And is the scene changing? Is the water going up or going down? Tracking is important. Set buoys, set markers, all of these things. And then think about the electrical, chemical, biological, environmental, sunburn, long-term on scene, hypo or hyperthermia, and then the slip, trip, and fall hazards. We talked about witnesses, what that size up looks like, point last seen, last known point. Engage your law enforcement personnel to assist with that. Mapping, if you have it. Again, these things don't usually happen in a vacuum. They happen all the time. You can pre-plan a lot of this. All right. And then based on as additional witnesses come forward, things change, we might see this response change, right? So we might switch up. The big thing is when operating the hot zone, we got to be prepared to self-rescue. So at the operations level, we're going to learn how to self-rescue, right? So at operations, we're never taking our feet off solid ground, right? It could go up to our PFD basically, but we're never going to not train in self-rescue. You're going to learn a couple strokes when we go to the pool, front crawl, the forward crawl. You'll often hear it called freestyle, right? But that's just the event, the freestyle event, but we're going to use a front crawl. We're also going to do a side stroke, a back stroke, and a breaststroke. Defensive swimming position, our feet are downstream, our head is up, our hands are at our sides, our feet are going to protect us, right? the big thing is, before we do anything, we got to get a good assessment of the scene. If I'm doing an operation and 75 feet below us is a culvert, that's not a good, throw bag evolution. So what do we do? Assess the scene, assess the victim's location, and their condition. Do we have the right equipment to go effect a rescue in this thing? Do we have the right personnel? And then most importantly, we're going to follow the rescue sequence and always have backup. So what's the rescue sequence? Aid the victim to self-rescue if they can. Again, it's, even that water could be polluted. So why am I going to introduce myself if I'm not wearing a dry suit to those conditions? If I can throw them a PFD and have them walk to me. Shore-based rescue techniques, reaching out, for something for them to grab on, or throwing a bag. These are all options. Doing a double line floating tether. A boat-based rescue, again, it's more complicated. It's more dangerous. Additional personnel. What if they lose that motor? Do they have plans in place? Are they good, good paddle skills? Again, least risky to most risky is what we're working through here. Direct contact, again, for most of us will be the most risky thing that we're going to engage in. And then lastly, helicopter. But for all of these, we're going to have backup. But it's important to remember that we can use our knowledge and experience to skip steps if necessary. Start at the least risky. Like we said, talk them out if they can. But before they move, we're going to get them a PFD and a helmet. Shore-based rescue. Here we get some throw bags. Reaching and throwing, right? Limited risk to the rescuer. Throw bag, paddle, tree branch, flotation. These are all, important for us. However, we got to know how to self-rescue because we could get pulled in if we have poor technique here. Big advantage, we remain on shore, limited reach, 75-foot bag commonly, right? You know what I mean? But what is the number one, defining characteristic of a throw bag? Water rescue throw bag floats, right? And I'll teach you a little bit about that in a moment. Different models for different conditions. It's important for you to have an understanding of when's going to work best, when's not going to work, because that's going to come into play. Big thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we go to the pool. Best location to throw, where I'm going to have the shortest distance. Get their attention. Let them know, rope, 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 coming your way. Throw it to them. We're going to throw through them. Throw it right across their chest, right? And we're going to try to throw it past them. If it ends up behind them because they're traveling too fast, it'll catch up to them. If we lead them, it may get away for them. We may need to do a static or dynamic belay. Remember, static belay, we're trying to vector that line. Person holding the rope is staying in place, and the person assisting is going to run down the shore while holding that rope, which is going to change that angle. So if I try to throw straight across and they run down shore, it's going to tighten that angle up. Obviously, that dynamic belay, we might be running upshore as we change this, depending on how far they're going to be. Big thing, having backup bags ready, adequate backup in case we go in. Additional rescuers may need to be ready to go effect a rescue. So let me just show you this. And we'll have this one queued up we'll have this one queued up for you in your playlist that you're going to go and have. So in this case, all right, let's see here. So this is moving. This is really moving. This guy's trying to get in a good position. He's in his defensive position. Now he's switched aggressive, trying to get a little bit closer to shore. All right. Trying to set his buddy up. His buddy he's not wearing good PPE, doesn't have good gear. I'm not really happy about any of that. This guy wants to get free of that line. He's good. Making sure he's really concerned his buddy's okay because he's wearing like a USAR-style turnout gear. All right. But here we go. Having adequate backup. Here comes his peer. Rope, rope, rope. No big deal. It's behind him. It's going to catch up. setting up on the downstream, and pendulum them in. All right, so super important, obviously for us to have that backup. If you're receiving a throwback line, again, we need to be prepared. We're in our defensive position. It gets thrown across our chest. We want to put it on our far shoulder, and it's actually going to help us vector our position. If I'm floating downstream, and I'm floating on my back, floating downstream, which is here the camera. If I point my head in this direction, I'm going to go in that direction. So if I want to get over to shore and they throw me a bag, I'm actually going to put it on my left shoulder, which will tilt me into the shore. And you guys can demonstrate that at the pool. You may have to swim for it. The big thing to reinforce to these guys is when they're catching the bag, if it's on their near shoulder, to go over their head and onto their far shoulder. Don't roll into it. Coil throw is basically we've thrown the bag. We got to recoil it to get it out there again. Different techniques. Just make sure that we're gonna demonstrate both in the pool, and they have to make rescues with both. Moving water crossings. If the water's really going, but it's too shallow, I may be able to do a moving water crossing using a paddle or a pike pole or some other kind of moving water crossing device. And we're using it for probing and support. It could be single man or multiple, depending on the condition. And we'll show you some of those and how you're going to really help support that person as you go in. And we'll show you that on the pool deck. Single rescuer, again, it's up against the side of the head. The big thing is we'll talk about it. You guys can give a little bit of insight into it. Now's a great time for you to really button up what your timing looks like. You can stretch this out to the pool time, or to go throw these things out in the garage, or if necessary, you can shorten it because you're going to go over it in the pool anyway. Big thing to reinforce: if we lose it, we got to get in the self-rescue and get out. Here's person's mostly probing; they're not doing much support. Big thing with the V. It's not like the flying V, Mighty Ducks. We're going real tight. The first person is in the lead and everybody else is stacked up behind. Real tight, shoulder to shoulder. And this isn't really a V. The next part of the rescue sequence, we need to have an understanding of it, that boat-based rescue. They may be using this as a platform to get to the person. They may be moving equipment to the other side for a double-line floating tether. But it's an additional risk. You should understand, though, that there's powered and unpowered models for using the boat, and those are technician level skills. And reinforce them; they can see that. Go direct contact rescue is obviously the most dangerous technician level skill. They may panic; they may hold you down. You can be tethered or untethered. Very physically demanding, high level of rope skill required. Foot entrapments, that point last seen, last known point. We're going to do a support and snag line. Maybe looking for they're just the color of their vest. We have to look at what those previous entrapment locations look like. Because it may be a popular spot, but we're going to use a support and snag line to try to support that person and then get them out of the water to free their foot. At this point, I'll usually share a video, just to reinforce what the foot entrapment looks like. And again, this is going to be in your course outline.
No! Hello! Swimmer! Hey, he's pinned!
Foot entrapment.
He's pinned! Let go, he's pinned! He's pinned! He's caught! There's a swimmer caught! Help! More help!
Got a throwback to him. Awesome. This is they know this is coming. This is a high traffic areas during event. Now, I like to talk about the rescue sequence. What do we do before we go to initiate a rescue? What if we were standing by in this area, to effect this rescue? What's this going to look like? So, person obviously can't self-rescue. He's got a foot entrapment. So the shore-based rescue is not going to be able to free him. This may be a support and snag operation. We're basically going to hold them up and then try to get a rope and see if they can't push their leg down. So there's some kind of undercut here that this person's foot is in and caught. All right, as more people show up, remember, these guys take a lot of similar training. They're going through the rescue sequence. They're formulating a plan. Somebody's going to start building kit in the back. So we can see here, this is real time, 4.5 minutes. So they tie this off for him. They switch roles, and somebody who's a little bit higher trained is going to start trying to build a system in the back. This guy's got rope. He's looking at it. They do movable control points. The technician level skill, think of a high line on its side. He's thinking maybe he's going to get tethered in. This guy's trying to put some ideas together. Again, they're going through the rescue sequence, but what just happened? What do we do before we commit to a rescue? This guy's a hero, though. Watch his shrug. Listen. Do we have throw bags ready downstream? Do we have backup? Do we have other systems? Do we have kayakers ready in this eddy to help get him out? So, utilize that support and snag line. It can be unweighted if they're at the surface, they can help push it down, or weighted if they cannot assist. All right, there's multiple people. First line across is going to support the person. Second line is basically going to be that snag. Here we have somebody with a foot entrapment in the water. Good example. First line across is under their chest. We're trying to pull it up. All right, so this person's stuck. So they're trying to support him. The next line across, all right, so just keeping their head out of the water. We're not tipping them over backwards. Next, so here we go, supporting them out of the water. The next line across is going to the bottom. These guys are pushing this as low as they can get. They're in the water pushing it down. They're safe, right? They're in a position where it's tenable, but they might be crawling under that support line to get behind it and continue pulling back. As soon as they get back, they may be able to free the leg. We need to have a technician level person ready to perform a GO or boat-based or helicopter rescue. Double line floating tether. We'll show you how to tie this. 2 lines attached to a buoy. We're going to use hand signals. We're going to move it back and forth to rescue the person. Set up 1 for your primary, and the second is your backup. All right. Traditionally, this should be above the water. All right. What we're looking for is because this was not above the water, they're on the upstream side. All right. We actually want this thing floating so that it stays above the water until they can get their arm through it and be on the downstream side of it. You know, the big thing, rescue's not complete until the victim's in a safe place and rescuers are out safely. You should have technicians ready to go hands-on with the victim as needed. All right, so super important. All right, so let me stop sharing this. This guy. This is another video. Again, this will be in the outline. I have all of the videos. All right, so the outline will basically have each section and then all the videos that I think are kind of good for you in that to watch. Come on. All right, here we've got the old inflated hose. These guys are considering this the warm zone. Now they're running downstream. And they've got technicians ready where they're going to retrieve them. These guys are doing this. They've clearly pre-planned this as an area to go and effect a rescue. And they did. This is awesome. But down here, we need to have technicians ready because they're going to go hands-on. They may be tethered. All right, they might have to do a little bit of a go rescue. Awesome. Some of the things we're going to build, basic rope. All right. Big thing, as we're using these systems, we should have an understanding of the commands. You know, haul, stop, raise, lower, ready to haul. These are going to be important for us as we're building some of these basic systems. One thing, safety checking all of these. Small incidents, you may have an operational safety person. So somebody who didn't build it, but is competent and can check it for safety, right? And then obviously there's some of these systems might need belay or progress capture, but we're not really going to talk about those. But here we see a simple 2-to-1, and then a change of direction on the guardrail. So depending on time, we can explain it to them. Basically, just talk about a Z-rig's the only thing they're going to learn when they go through tech. But when we're all done, it's important for us to be able to do all, completely break down this incident. Because we need to go and effect the next rescue. And if we can't break this down safely and transition, we're not going to make the next grab. All right, so we got to get all of our gear safely. And if you're only operations and you made a commitment, you might have to make a determination for using some text to retrieve that, putting the gear out of service. But we don't want to leave that in the water. It's going to be an entrapment hazard for rescuers in the event of something else. Documenting, debriefing, right? The big thing, gross decon everybody. All right. Decon the equipment, decon the personnel, but make sure that we don't endanger anybody to retrieve gear. Remember, big thing, look at your TENO skill testing, after action review, critical incident stress debriefing. All right, big thing is do that AAR quickly so that we can formalize those ideas before we move on to the next one. That post-incident debrief, right? What were the challenges while we're still fresh in our mind? After the event, we can do that post-incident analysis, right? Gives us that hindsight, more perspective, different personnel. Big thing, what happened, what improvements can we make? And we can use that failure acronym. Failure to understand the water environment, additional medical concerns not considered, inadequate rescue skills, lack of teamwork and/or experience, understanding the logistics, rescue versus recovery not considered, or equipment not mastered. Which one of those contributed? And sometimes it's above our control. All right. That terminates Unit 5.